replied, never. You're not going to die. Look, my Father doesn't do anything, great or small, without confiding in me. Why would he hide this from me? It's not so. David took an oath and said, your father knows very well that I have found favor in your eyes. And he said to himself, Jonathan must not know this, or he will be grieved. Yet as surely as the Lord lives, and you live, there is only a step between me and death. Jonathan said to David, whatever you want me to do, I'll do for you. Come back. Told you the remote wasn't working, wasn't it? Where are we at here? There we go. Okay. I'm going to set this right behind here because it doesn't, or I'll forget about it. So David, carrying the weight of being hunted. He knows he's being hunted. He knows Saul has got a target on his back. Why? Because the bride price that he gave, that's a little bit of a hint that he's after him. Maybe when a guy tries to throw a spear at you a couple of times, that's usually a good indicator that somebody may not like you. I don't know. So, Bob, I got a spear in my trunk. Stopped by my car a little after. Anyway, so he's got a mechanism for contacting Jonathan. And what we're going to find out is Jonathan is willing to leverage both his relationship with Saul and his position as prince, really to protect David. But this is not where the text is actually going to start. David, interestingly, is going to take an oath. Did you notice this in the text? And I wrestled with this a little bit. He says, as surely as the Lord lives, so he's relying on God's significance and importance. So he's kind of inviting God in to say, hey, back me up on this. And then he says, as surely as you live. And both of these, are biblical formulas. And as surely as you live, very often when it's used in Scripture, relies on the significance of the other person. So you don't say this to a nobody, you say this to a king, you say this to somebody who's significant. So surely as you live and exist and have your position, you're pretty important. So God's pretty important, going to back me up. You're pretty important. You have the character and the integrity to testify to what I say. David, interestingly, uses both of these for his oath. What's he swearing about, though? I didn't get this. I just really struggled with it until Bob gave me a call. He called me up in the middle of the week, and he said, Rob, I need you to loan me $13,000. And I said, Bob, if I had it, I would loan it to you in a heartbeat. But I can take out a loan. I got pretty good credit. Why do you need $13,000? And he said, I was in Vegas. And I lost big in Vegas. But the problem is that I was in a mob-owned casino. And I skipped before I was able to pay everything off. And now they're after me. And I said, Bob, you're out of your mind. There's no way I believe that about you. And nobody is going to believe that about you. And he said, they're threatening me. I said, Bob, come on. Enough's enough. And he said, I swear it's true. They're trying to kill me. If you can hear what Bob called me up this week, you get it, right? Nobody believes Bob's been in Vegas. Nobody believes he's been gambling at a mob-owned casino. It's just unbelievable. So Bob would step in that situation and say, I swear they're trying to kill me. You ever have somebody come up to you on the street and tell you a story because they're needing $20 and they say, I swear I'm hungry. I swear I got kids in the car up the street and we just need gas. If you'll just give me money for gas, all my needs will be met. And we had a guy when we lived at Shawnee and I lived in the inner city in Cincinnati who would do that. He would make his rounds every 2 years. He just wandered the neighborhood knocking on doors. And every 2 years, you'd see this guy knock on your door. Knocks on my door, 10 o'clock at night. We live on a dead-end street. And he says, yeah, my car is parked just up the street, and I got my wife and kids in. I just need to get back over the river. Could you give me some money for gas? And I said, this story just doesn't really make sense, buddy. He says, I swear it's true. And I said, no problem. I just mowed the lawn. I filled up my gas can. I'll go get it and we'll walk up the street and fill up your car. Like, no, 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 no. But he swore. He swore it was true. We hear this language all the time, right? You go to court. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Put your hand on the Bible, so help me God. What are we saying? It becomes this kind of backup noise and rhetoric in our culture where what are we saying when we swear? We're invoking an oath of something outside of us to back up the validity of our statement. Does that make sense? That's really what's going on here with David. Why does David need to do this with Jonathan, do you think? Why does he need to swear that Saul is trying to kill him?
Jonathan doesn't know anything about it.
Yeah. Saul has deliberately kept Jonathan in the dark. So Katie is very embedded in college and lots of friends, and every one of her friends that I have wanted to kill, I never tell her. I just don't. I keep her in the dark. So what if Katie has a friend who's a bit of a jerk, maybe dishonest, maybe failing a course? Okay, yeah, I have some legal, requirements on all that stuff, but I don't want to hurt Katie by saying, hey, your friend's a little bit of a deadbeat. I don't want to do that. I just keep it to myself. Saul's doing the same thing. He's planning to kill David. And if he can do it in a way that separates him from Jonathan, he doesn't want the headache of having a guy sitting at the dinner table with him every night who's, your own son staring daggers at you. So he's not too interested in that. And so he just doesn't, because Saul's kept Jonathan in the dark, but Saul relies on Jonathan for absolutely everything. Jonathan is the oldest son. He's going to be Saul's replacement. So what's Saul doing? He's training him, right? He's giving the ins and outs of politics and people and regional leaders and all the towns and villages, everything that goes on in the kingdom. Saul is keeping Jonathan informed. And Jonathan has a hard time believing that there's one little tiny piece of information that Saul wouldn't keep him informed on. Oh, I need to kill your best friend. But it makes sense that Saul wouldn't say anything, and it makes sense that David would know and Jonathan wouldn't. So David says, look, I know some stuff that you don't about Saul, which is kind of interesting because it doesn't seem before now, even though these two guys are best friends, that David has spent his time undermining Saul's character. He hasn't been planting these ideas in Jonathan's mind, which is kind of cool when someone can mistreat you and you don't need to spread it around. You don't need to defend yourself. You don't need to justify it. Apparently, David, until now, really hasn't said anything to Jonathan. So he's caught completely off guard. But David, in a low moment, tired of being run down and hunted, just explodes and vents to Jonathan. It's news to Jonathan. This isn't true. And David's like, I swear it's true. So his oath then is like our oaths. It's designed to increase the veracity, the integrity or the truthfulness of the statement. Same way we would take an oath. But how far do we push what their oath was religiously? Was it the kind of oath like we make? Yeah, I swear it's true. The text doesn't seem to do that. The divine realm for us is really an afterthought. Anybody can go into court, swear on a Bible, swear it's true, and perjury and contempt of court order later, you're wondering what happened. How come they didn't keep their oath? Yeah, we know you're a liar if you don't keep your oath, but at the end of the day, we don't expect the divine realm to step in if we break the oath. Yeah, we might swear on the Bible, but what happens if you break it? Whatever. And people learn that, right? So they say, hey, I need a handout, I need a little bit of help, I swear I have this need, and it's worth nothing when it's spoken. Not worth the paper it's printed on, which is absolutely true because I've never even been given a piece of paper. Somebody using I swear in order to increase their others' perception of truthfulness, we know that's worthless. But we have to hear the culture a little bit differently. For us, again, the divine realm is a bit of an afterthought. We don't hear it, most of us, as a culture, as a regular background for us. But for them, you woke up in the morning and you said a prayer to God. You went to bed at night and you said a prayer to God. God was the core of all your holidays. Again, we have pulled the divine out of everything we can, from Easter to Christmas. We replaced a resurrected Lord with a rabbit, right? And a manger with a tree. You know how it goes, right? But in this era, everybody assumed the divine realm. It was the background noise that was always running. It wasn't an afterthought for them. So when David takes an oath, you've got the same kind of characters then that you have now. The person who understands the gods or God and believes it and says, I am inviting the gods or God, depending whether you're Hebrew or not, but you're inviting the divine realm to step in and back up your oath. In other words, you break the oath, they're coming after you. Which one is David? Is he just, spouting stuff where it's true? The text sounds like he knows exactly what he's doing, that he's taking an oath and he uses this double formula. That suggests that he is religiously serious about the statement he makes. In other words, he is making a testimony to Jonathan about what his father is planning, and he's doing it saying, God will back me up on this. So it's pretty serious for him. So when we talk about oaths, I think I asked about it last week. Jesus actually discourages us from taking oaths in Matthew 5. But again, you want to add substance. You want to beef up your promise. Or sometimes it's not only a promise, but it's an obligation. David doesn't have an obligation. He's just saying, I'm telling you the truth. Your dad's trying to kill me. Sometimes it's, yes, I will absolutely honor the boundary markers between your land and mine. I'm not going to violate those. I'm not going to build a fence on your side of the property. I'm not going to graze my cattle on your side. Two guys might make an agreement and they might take an oath. And that oath is a promise to keep their obligation. But it's the same thing. It's saying that I am making a statement in the eyes of the divine realm that I expect to step in and enforce that if I violate my word. So it's very, very dangerous if it's broken. Because what happens if you drag God into a situation to back up your integrity? And what are you saying about God if you break your oath? Whatever you say about Jephthah in Judges 11, the guy kept his vow. Why? Because he took it that seriously. It's better to kill his own daughter than to break an oath to God. You just don't do it. So this is what we're dealing with. One of the things that we do know from Scripture is that it's very easy to say, that's a big problem if God's going to step in if I break my oath. I don't want the weight of that. So you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to learn to sidestep God's direct involvement. So you go to court, right? You don't swear to God in a ceremony. You put your hand on a Bible, right? Kind of a substitute, a fill-in for God. Do you see this anywhere in Scripture that you know of? Right, Matthew 23. Whatever. It's one of the only two places where Jesus actually teaches on oaths. Now, he uses oaths to teach sometimes in parables, and there are people who actually take oaths. And you know the fun story in the book of Acts where a bunch of guys want to kill Paul, and they take an oath not to eat or drink until they've killed him? That's just great. They're so theologically committed to murdering an innocent man that they're going to swear to God that they'll kill this guy, which has got all sorts of problems with it. And the text just wanders off following Paul after that because they don't kill him. And you got to wonder what happens to them. What do you do when you can't fulfill your oath? And yet you really believe you have promised God that you're going to make this happen. Oh, that's kind of fun stuff. But the two texts that Jesus actually uses to teach about oaths, and we'll look at both of them this morning, is the Sermon on the Mount, the one text, which is what I referred to in Matthew 5. Why might Jesus discourage oaths? Like, everybody in the Bible takes oaths. What's the problem? Any ideas? Like when Bob left the casino, he said to the guys, I swear I'll pay you back. But why do you think, we know Jesus does discourage oaths, but why do you think it is?
I think part of it is when you're so used to being in a culture where you give oaths before you do something, your normal speech doesn't mean as much.
So if everybody is a Nazi, real Nazis don't matter, right? Kind of politically where you'd go these days. Yeah, I think that works.
We don't know the future. We'll swear an oath, whatever, down the road. Things intercede. We can't fulfill that oath.
So James 4, let's go to such and such a city and spend a year there, engage in business and make money. So our intention, and if you attach an oath to your intention, there are some things that are just out of your control. Yeah, so I think that fits as well. Anything else that comes to mind? I have my own ideas, but I worked ahead.
In James, when it says, let your yeses be yeses and your noes be noes.
It's actually a different guy who said that. We'll look at it. Two texts. Let's read them. Matthew 23. There are 7 woes, 7 being a spiritual number for completeness. Jesus, the last thing he does in his teaching in regards to his enemies is pronounce 7 woes against the religious leaders. Jesus is like done being any kind of gentle with these guys. He comes unglued and just unloads on them. And he just blasts them. You're a bunch of whitewashed tombs, you're wicked, you're this and that. Here's what he says in verse 16 of Matthew 23. He says, woe to you, you blind guides. You say, if anyone swears by the temple, it means nothing. But if anyone swears by the gold of the temple, he is bound by that oath. Oh, yeah, okay, whatever. You blind fools, which is greater, the gold or the temple that makes the gold sacred? You also say if anyone swears by the altar, it means nothing. But if anyone swears by the gift on it, he is bound by his oath. You blind men, which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? Therefore, he who swears by the altar swears by it and everything on it. And he who swears by the temple swears by it and the one who dwells in it. You got to hear this the way the Pharisees are hearing it. This is blasting them right between the eyes. We'll talk about why here in just a minute. And he who swears by heaven swears by God's throne and the one who sits on it. This is the problem, like these religious hypocrites who say, we're going to kill this guy and we're going to swear to God that that's going to happen. You don't want to do that because you don't want to offend God. The game that they're playing is this second subpoint here, that you sidestep a disrespect to God by swearing on other sacred objects, right? So you've got a temple. Let's see if we can do a little Star of David in there. I can't draw a Star of David. There we go. I only teach Old Testament. That's why I can't draw a Star of David. So you got your temple, and oh, look, there's orange. This is going to dub for gold, and you've got some shiny gold on your temple. All right. You don't want to swear to God because you're doing all sorts of weird things, like trying to kill innocent people, right? And you know how the Pharisees roll, right? They're not genuinely religious. They use religion for their own power, their own benefit, their own prestige, their own financial gain, all of it. Everything corrupt the human heart desires. These guys are leveraging religion in order to make happen. Jesus steps in and says, you're a bunch of fakes. And he just blasts them publicly, and they kill him for it. Well, one of the things that they're doing is they want to play the game of we honor God, right? So you've got Yahweh up here. So we won't offend Yahweh, and he is so sacred, we have to kind of back it up a little bit. So instead what we'll do is we'll swear by the temple. You don't swear to Yahweh, you swear by something that belongs to him, because that's still sacred, that's still important. And this is what people, the average guy on the street would do. I swear to the temple. If the temple's standing there gleaming in the sunlight, as long as it's there, I'm going to keep my word. That's what people are doing. Pharisees come along and they know how to play this game. I'll swear by the temple. But theologically, what do? They tell people, nah, you're not obligated. You need to swear by the gold in the temple. The gold is what matters. And you see what they're doing is they're moving it a step back. So one step back from God is swearing by the temple. 2 steps back is swearing by the gold that's on the temple. All is a symbol of God. And what does God say? You want to play that game, Yahweh lives in the temple. There's no difference. You're just playing semantic games to try to pretend that you're loyal to Yahweh when you're not. The second item he gives is the idea of the altar. Whoops. It's supposed to be only a single leg, right? I don't know. You got horns on the side. And you stick a dead animal on there. And that dude is barbecuing. And you play the exact same game. Where's the altar? Well, it actually lives in the temple, the outer temple complex. So you got a bronze basin where you do the wash-up stuff. And you put a temple, and you don't swear by Yahweh. You actually swear by the altar. No, that's not close enough to God. You need to be a little more spiritual than that. They're trying to embed their theology in the way you do oaths, and so that's no good. But if you swear by the actual gift burning on the altar, then they say, oh, that's the way to take an oath. And he says, this is all in service of Yahweh to begin with. At the end of the day, who's the object of or the focus of your oath, of your promise? It's always God. And the Pharisees want to play these games because you know what they do with it is they know the ins and outs that, okay, I break my oath here, but that's okay because I swore on the temple and it's not that important, which is probably the same way that the guys who planned to kill Paul got out of it. They took an oath, but they probably didn't swear it on Yahweh. They probably found something really, really low down the totem pole to say, yeah, we swore on something little, so it's not a big thing. We'll show up with $5, put it in the offering plate, and we're good. This is the kind of games that they're playing, not because they're committed to God, but they want to do this double dance of convincing themselves they were, more importantly, convincing everybody else they are. And they, as a result, are doing what? Trying to manipulate everybody's perception and theology about oaths. But there's another problem with it as well. And Jesus is going to get into that in Matthew 5, Sermon on the Mount. This is the one Nate referred to as letting your yes be yes, your no be no. Jesus says, again, not the religious leaders, although they were in the audience listening. Again, you've heard it said to the people, that it was said to the people long ago, don't break your oath, but keep the oaths you have made to the Lord. So good Torah, law of Moses stuff. You promise God, you better deliver, because God's the one hearing you make him that promise. And then Jesus says, I tell you, don't swear at all. Not by heaven, for it's God's throne, which is the third example in Matthew 23 that's used, because it's God's throne. Or by earth, for it's his footstool. Or, let's see, where are we? Or by Jerusalem, for it's the city of the great king. Do not swear by your head, for you can't make even one hair white or black. So this is the out of control thing. But simply let your yes be yes and your no be no. And then we get this one phrase that wraps up oaths for us and why we don't play this game. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. What does our enemy, our supernatural enemy bent on our destruction, have to do with making oaths to objects?
It tells the kind of person you are.
In what way? Yeah, so if I don't make an oath, I'm okay lying to people. It's worked so far. Yeah.
I think it immediately tells people that when you're normally speaking, that isn't actually always truthful and reliable, but only when you swear, if you're someone who swears. But if you never swear by anything specific, let your yeses be yes and your noes be noes, then you are presenting that all the words that you're speaking are meant to be truthful.
Yeah, the idea is there are not levels of truthfulness. Kind of honest is, yeah, not a big deal, just kind of meh or okay. But by golly, if you take an oath, then absolutely, that's the way to do it. That's the super stuff. Like, you can be more true, and this is kind of less true, but truth is truth. How does the Bible define truth? Yeah, in the big sense, we're actually looking at John 14:6, right? I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. Paul says, stop lying to one another. That's not who we are. The idea is that God is true. It's impossible for God to lie. The few things that God can't do, one of them is lie. Being consistent with God's character. Which is what the law was always about, which is what the Spirit lives in us to create as we're transformed in the image of Christ. This, that God is working to complete in us, makes oaths useless, makes them irrelevant. You don't need to back up your testimony by saying, oh, if I swear on some object, then I'm going to be a little bit more truthful. No, you need to be known as a person of your word. And I think as the kingdom demands, when you let your yes be yes and your no be no, as an extension of the truthfulness of God, like God's truthfulness lives in and through us. Is God a person, a being of his word? Absolutely. And so if we want to be like him, we also have to be people of our word.
Is there a little flavor of the first commandment in this?
Have no other gods before me?
Yeah. So you're putting value on something.
Maybe combined with the second commandment, yeah, no graven images. One of the things that I think this also leads to, as an aside, I don't know that that's what Jesus was after, but yeah, when we make sacred objects, what happens, has always happened, is we begin to trust the objects, right? Think about all the groups, not only, say, Catholicism. I show a video in my biblical interp class of people in an Indian temple lining up because there's like an animal head that drips holy water, and people line up and they'll catch it in a cup, or they'll put it on their hands and they'll rub it on their head, or they'll drink it or whatever. And they're just amazed because it's just this miraculous flow of water. And the video lets you know that it's actually the condensation line for an air conditioning unit on the temple. We laugh at that. But you've heard the names, right? Shroud of Turin, right? Bones of St. John. That people believe that objects somehow embed magical power of God. And the idea is that if we can somehow connect ourselves to these objects, we're doing basically what idolatry is all about, right? Practicing some form of magic, whether in relation to other gods or just trying to leverage God. At the end of the day, we are trying to control God, and this is what we want to do with an oath. We want to control God like we think we can control other people. And we'll use an oath to do it. and we will use our speech to do it. We do this all the time, not just with oaths, right? What's the worst thing you've ever done to another human being? Anybody want to volunteer? All right, now imagine you have to tell Harold Keck that story. How are you going to phrase it? Not, I wanted what I want and I was willing to hurt this person to get it. It was, I was having a bad day, right? Or they annoyed me for so long and I just snapped. I did, that's not who I am. Every single apology from every single public figure who's had any kind of a scandal. And what do? It's always, we consult the PR group and we downplay it because we all have a sense of honor and shame, right? And we want to minimize our own responsibility and culpability. And the interesting, terrifying, wonderful, and beautiful way God made the universe is so much of our reality is reflected in speech. And this is the word faith folks that want to believe they can speak a reality. Well, we do it all the time, right? We might criticize the theology, but we try to shape other people's perceptions to create an image of reality that isn't true. Might not be an out-and-out lie, but we want to look good or at least less bad at the end of the day. It's the same heart, I think, behind an oath that makes life about us rather than the God who redeems us. The bigger your sin, the stinkier you smell to eternity, the more glorious the grace of God is. But we don't like that implication. Most of us don't want the cross. We don't want to have to want the cross. We would rather create a perception where we don't need it. And I'm rambling at this point, but anyway, where are we at? Oaths, yeah. So, David takes this oath. Basically, we don't want to fault him for all of this theology and philosophy of he's somehow unspiritual. David, connected to God, really is saying to Jonathan, God's going to back me up on this. You can ask him. And the text rolls on. So David said, hey, look, tomorrow's the New Moon Festival, and I'm supposed to dine with the king. Well, he's in the king's circle of advisors and warriors and whatnot. So he says to Jonathan, but let me go and hide in the field until the evening of the day after tomorrow. So if your father misses me at all, tell him this. David asked my permission to hurry to Bethlehem, his hometown, because an annual sacrifice is being made there for his whole clan. If he says, very well, in other words, no problem, your servant is safe. But if he loses his temper, you can be sure that he is determined to harm me. This is all news for Jonathan. Jonathan's processing this as he goes along. He says, as for you, show kindness to your servant, for you have brought him into a covenant with you before the Lord. If I am guilty, kill me yourself. Why hand me over to your father? Saul is probably not going to be as merciful as Jonathan would in killing him if David's guilty. So what David is planning to do is just be a little bit sneaky. Again, not the whole lying thing that we've been talking about. David's trying to save his life, and so what they're going to do is they're going to concoct this ruse to be able to cover for his absence. Because what they want to do is phrase things in a way that Saul's true perspective about David will just come out for Jonathan to be able to see. So, New Moon Festival, really good time to be gone because he can just say, I'm supposed to celebrate it with my family, back in Bethlehem. So no problem. Just say I'm expected to be there and see what happens. So David basically says, you remember this covenant we made a couple chapters earlier? Where was it? Back in 18, 13, somewhere around there. And again, David, as a follower of Yahweh, devout follower of Yahweh, places God at the center of their friendship. And he basically is bold enough to tell his friend, if I'm wrong on this, if I've done anything wrong to your father, you need to kill me. And this is not an arrogance thing. It's not Job. In the same way, Job didn't have arrogance. Job was just baffled. Job spends a lot of time defending his righteousness. Not because he was arrogant, but because he was confused and he just didn't get what was going on. He tried to live righteously, and it's always good to know where the markers of your own integrity are. David, same way. So he doesn't have any reason to think Jonathan would kill him, and relies on their covenant to do that.
Was David making up a lie here?
Ma-
He wasn't going to a festival, or was he?
No.
So
he-
David made up a lie, told Jonathan?
He was lying, yeah.
Does that justify? It's okay to lie if it's going to save your life, or?
You live in Nazi Germany in 1942. You are hiding Jews in the closet. Germans knock on the door and say, is there anybody else here with you? You know you've got a secret wall with Anne Frank or somebody else hiding behind it. And you say, nobody here, in your best German. And so you tell the German soldiers, Vamoose. Is that German? No, probably not.
I often wondered about that.
Have you sinned? Have you sinned?
Recently, within the last few minutes, yeah.
Have you sinned? By protecting somebody.
Well, the same as smuggling Bibles into a country. It's against the law. They say you have
Follow the law at all times. Yeah, so one of the things that Peter says when they're like, hey, stop preaching this gospel. Oh, we got to obey authority. I guess we're done. No, when it comes to choosing between morality and God, you do the will of God. But again, the purpose isn't, we very often lie, I heard it said once, when we think others can't handle the truth, right? Okay, that's fair. But I think most of our motivation for lying revolves around the elevation of our own self.
self-preservation.
Well, not even self-preservation, but just self-actualization. In other words, we want to look better. You're standing over the body, or in your case, maybe 3 or 4 bodies, with a bloody knife in your hand, and the cop walks in, and you say, I know what this looks like, but I didn't do it. And you go to trial and trying to get off, right? I mean, our whole criminal justice system is our defense lawyers dishonest in the way our system works, because the presumption of innocence is trying to create a perception of innocence among the jury. So, I mean, that becomes a whole other problem. Here's an interesting question. Does Jesus ever deceive people? Yeah, does Jesus ever deceive people? Huh? He hardens hearts, yeah. Romans says God actually reinforces a lie. So what's going on there? And then, yeah, so that's what we say. Why do we say that? That's not in the text that he changed his mind. Yeah, but we have to supply that when we teach and preach the text because of our moral opposition to lying in any form. And so what we do is we say, well, Jesus changed his mind because we have to, we think, liberate him from actually being deceitful in any capacity. Does Jesus ever create a perception among his enemies that he's going to be in one place when he's somewhere else, that he's doing stuff? I mean, you guys have seen The Chosen, right? This guy drives the narrative. He knows exactly where he's going, when he's supposed to be there, and Jesus is not above laying low, right? Being in the wrong place, doing things to create perceptions. So you can go with Star Trek and Mr. Spock, right? Which is where he says it's not a lie to keep the truth to yourself. That's a whole different game about truthfulness. So I'm not lying if I just let you think something is. We ever do that with our kids?
To protect them, yes.
Yeah, so is it an issue between lying and whatever the greater good is? The 9th commandment, I think, helps us out here. We like to say don't lie. And I've known people that it is immoral, they believe it is immoral to lie under any circumstances whatsoever. Always wrong. The ninth commandment is actually legal terminology, right? Don't bear false witness in court. Why would you lie in court? Save your skin, or to gain some kind of an advantage over somebody else. It's interesting when, who was it? Ahab wants Naboth's vineyard, if you remember the story. And Naboth's like, this is my inheritance, and so I'm not gonna get rid of it. Jezebel engineers a party, gets Naboth there, and finds two people to actually lie, basically bear false witness, so that Ahab can inherit the vineyard after their testimony that Naboth has blasphemed God, gets the mob to kill him. And Ahab just, walks in, possesses the vineyard, everything's good. God is kind of ticked by that. The ninth commandment, I think, is lying for your own personal gain. So we can play with the ethics of, is it moral to hide Jews in the closet, right? Or, but you know how it works, right? In some countries, you're driving down the road and they say, are you carrying any Bibles? And you say no, and they wave you through, and you go do what? On behalf of God, meet the needs of people. And you're willing to take the hit if you're caught. You're driving in East LA and the cop pulls you over and says, you have any drugs? What are you after? Oh, I am here to actually make it past these cops so I can ignore God, right? And go hurt other people by selling it to them. It's completely flipped who the object of your speech is. In other words, you are acting, I think, truthfully by saying, I don't have any Bibles on me. I don't know, what do you think?
I just wonder about the dynamic. If David had said, tell your dad I'm afraid of him. And then Saul could have said, oh, don't be afraid. Why, that would have been the truth.
Yeah, and if Jonathan walked up and said, hey, Dad, David says that you're trying to kill him, Saul's like, no, that's not true at all. And then Jonathan would go back, and all of a sudden Jonathan's playing this game because Jonathan's been kept in the dark. So David believes, and I think he's effective at, because this works, in saying, yeah, we need to get the truth out of him in another way. Give him enough rope with a story, a yarn, to let him hang himself. And so if, like me, you're ever watching YouTube interrogations in the room of somebody who's done the crime, and you got the young dumb 20-something who's too dumb not to know he's going to get arrested, and the cop interviewing. Police are legally allowed to lie to suspects, and the idea is when they do that they will elicit the truth from a liar. Do you need to lie to a liar? Probably sometimes. Yeah. So I guess I don't understand the heart of God to be fixated with our moral adherence to one side of a line or not on lying. Everything's got to be truthful, everything's not. The idea is that when we pursue the heart of God, we are listening for His Spirit and are living in tune with His Spirit to be able to act as He wants us to act in any of those. And this is, there's lots of these kinds of things in Scripture, I think, where we see people dishonest, and it actually works out really well. I mean, Samson was okay until he stopped lying. So, right? When he finally gives away the secret of his hair, it all goes downhill from there. I don't know that I would make that text spiritual, but anything else on lying? Yeah.
Lying to protect someone.
Yeah, the whole Nazi searching for Jews in Berlin or somewhere during the war. Yeah, that example is it moral to lie to save someone's life? And I think that's the difference, is when lying is about me, then it's usually immoral. When lying is to benefit somebody else, it's usually moral. And there's exceptions to all of that as well. The difficulty is what benefits me and what doesn't, right? Jeremiah says the heart's deceitful above all things, who can know it? And we can rationalize all sorts of things playing word games that we do. Again, to create a perception, right, that elevates us and our honor a little bit. Maybe we don't need to be playing that game. Anything else online? We're down rabbit trail.
An expectation that someone's telling the truth, and you get this, like in politics, if they're negotiating, and it deals with an intelligence issue, the person's like, oh, like that Chinese leader that said, oh, I'm not sending any supplies to Iran to create missiles. Well, it's lying. But, another one's poker. I watch these poker players. And they ask, well, what's in your hand? And it doesn't matter what's in their hand. Whatever they say is going to not be true. But there is no expectation around that poker table that the person's telling the truth.
Yeah.
There's also intent is an important part of lying. If we, and this comes from having to do a dissertation on with deception, but the
Here, I'll hand you the broken remote, and you can finish. You can finish the hour for us, because.
also intent. Like people go, oh, George Bush, he lied because he said there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. He didn't lie. He really believed that.
Yeah.
So if you say something that you think is true, but it's not true, that's not a lie. On the other hand, if you say something that is true, but you think it's false, that is a lie. Another thing, as they start describing this, is there's got to be harm to the other person. And that's a little bit of what we're saying.
Yeah.
If it's for us. I mean, if you're not going to harm another person, which I still haven't understood that one. But that was something that people seemed pretty much in agreement when it came down to what constituted a lie.
Or at least an immoral one. Yeah.
And there's always equivocation where you speak in a way, and this is usually what humans do. You speak in a way where the person's going to believe something wrong, but you let them believe it's wrong. And at what point does that become false?
Yeah.
Become a lie? Well, it's not always a lie. Like if my wife comes and asks, "Does this haircut look good?" And I say,
Does this dress make me look fat? For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God in their response.
well, technically, that doesn't say, that's a true statement, it's the latest style, but it avoids the issue, whatever. And that's equivocation too.
No, that's great stuff. And ultimately, again, I think we can default to the nature of God on all of this, right? How does God act in relationship to other people? Which is always out of a place of his own truthfulness, his own fidelity to reality, and for the benefit of those with whom he's in relationship with, or who he's willing to be in relationship with. So God basically acts for the benefit of others, I think we can say. And to the extent that we do that, I think there's some wiggle room in terms of saying, okay, it's always wrong or it's always right. It's not. Now I want to read your dissertation, but it's not rooted in the action itself, and its correspondence to reality, which is how we treat lying. It's actually has a huge component connected to the heart that is making the statement. Yeah. So in this case, very, very necessary for David and Jonathan to pull this. At least David thinks it's necessary for Jonathan to pull this because Saul has already kept him in the dark. So he's not only saying your father wants to kill me, he's implying what? The guy's a deceiver. He's already pulling the wool over your eyes. So how do you get at the truth from a deceiver? Do you want to be honest with a dishonest person who's trying to manipulate you? No, you're just giving them information. I read about one guy, he's getting out of his car at Walmart, and he sees a guy walking up with a pair, like a shopping cart full of clothing, and he says, "Hey, dude, what pant size do you wear?" You know where this goes, right? The guy who's stolen all the stuff that's in the shopping cart has got a script in his head. Oh, I'm a size 34. Oh, well, I've got that right here. I'll give you a good deal on it. Try to hook you in. This guy said, my response is, I'm Donald Duck and I don't wear pants. It broke his script, so he doesn't he's lying to the guy in the moment, and it's such an obvious lie, but it just kind of derails what this guy is planning. But we don't have any kind of a responsibility, I think, ethically, morally, to interact with massive amounts of integrity and honesty to the person that is actually trying to manipulate and harm us. So where that kind of goes out the window is for the sake of the gospel, right? You know, just because Jesus has turned the other cheek, yeah, when we endure persecution, not for the sake of persecution, but for the sake of me, Jesus says earlier in Matthew 5. That's why we do what we do. Not just, you know, we let anybody mistreat us and anyone around us for any reason whatsoever because it's somehow virtuous. That there's a context even in all of that. Same thing with lying. So David in this case is trying to get at Saul's true motive, and the only way he can think to do it is through this little ruse. And we even use the word ruse, right? Because it sounds less like lying. So he's going to fib. Anyway, never Jonathan said, if I had the least inkling that my father was determined to harm you, wouldn't I tell you? David asked, who's going to tell me if your father answers you harshly? And Jonathan said, come, let's go out in the field. And so they went there together. Yeah, we can do this in 4 minutes. Why not? Jonathan also genuinely bound by their covenant. They got a covenant of friendship that, you know, we are each other's main boys. And so he's obligated to warn David. And so he's going to go along with it because he says, David, whatever you want, I'll do for you. And David says, here you go. Let's draw out your father's true perspective. And David's like, how are we going to make this happen? Because if he wants to harm, if Saul says everything's okay, then, you know, when I'm off to this feast, or say I'm off to the feast, no problem, I can come back, no big deal. But if he gets mad, I can't be anywhere near him because he's going to kill me. How are we going to arrange to answer this? And so to survive, David needs access to the information that Saul hates his guts. And so Jonathan has got a plan, and it's going to revolve around, of all things, archery. So Jonathan says to David, by the Lord, the God of Israel, I'll surely sound out my father by this time the day after tomorrow. If he's favorably disposed toward you, will I not send you word and let you know? But if my father is inclined to harm you, may the Lord deal with me, here's his oath, be it ever so severely, if I do not let you know and send you away safely. May the Lord be with you as he's been with my father, but show me unfailing kindness like that of the Lord as long as I live, so that I may not be killed. And do not ever cut off your kindness from my family, not even when the Lord has cut off every one of David's enemies from the face of the earth. I think this is a kind of a sad grow-up moment for our buddy Jonathan here. His heart's coming out because he realizes what's at stake. Because I think he's beginning to believe his friend, and he knows everything that's going to imply. So he's 2 days, 48 hours is what he's going to need to be able to determine if this is true. And we'll look at this next time, but the way the story is going to play out, Saul's going to be able to keep his cool the first day. Second day, though, the sun is starting to set on his opportunity. He's going to come unglued. So if Saul plans to harm David, Jonathan is going to help arrange his escape. But look how this text ends before we set up the archery thing next week. Jonathan says, okay, if this goes down bad, here's what I need from you. I need your kindness toward me. I don't want to die. And I want kindness toward my family. Why bring his family into this all of a sudden? Even after God removes David's enemies, who is this conversation all about as David's enemy? It's Saul. When Saul is off the table as the king, what happens to the king's descendants? What happens when the new king is on the throne? Not uncommon, and you see this throughout the rest of Israel's history, of like executing an entire family, an entire dynasty, to make sure there are no future competitors for the throne. Jonathan, I think, all of a sudden knows what's coming. I think he knows who the king is going to be at this point. And so he's expecting David to be king, I think. I think at this point, he's anticipating Saul's demise. And he knows that the fallout from that is going to affect his family. And so what he says is, I think he doesn't want all of that to come from David. Jonathan and David are close enough to know that God is the one who is putting David on the throne. And David's character is going to come out even more, that even when God gives him the opportunity to strike out against Saul, David won't do it. And I think that's part of the glue of their friendship, is you just like a guy who's patient, who doesn't get ahead of God, who doesn't need to make something happen. Like, you love those kinds of people who are super successful, but they don't need to be successful. They don't need it. They just happen to be. Those kinds of people are great to be around because they're not driven. They're content. And they're usually very, very mature. And Jonathan knows he's next in line for the throne, and he knows he's a dead man if David follows the typical warrior king thing of like, let's get rid of the old dynasty. And so Jonathan is trusting David with his life and his family, which David has just done with him. These two guys are good friends. So go be a friend of somebody else. Let's pray and we'll get out of here. Father, thank you for coming in the person of Jesus to be the way and the truth and the life for us. We thank you that you are true. You are the ultimate destination and reflection of reality and those who search for it. Teach us to seek that we may find you. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.